Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We sure do appreciate it. On the line right now is Dr. Dave Janda from davejanda.com. He's a radio show host, and his show is called Operation Freedom and is uploaded right away to davejanda.com as a podcast. Dave Janda, thanks so much for joining us.
Sean, thanks very much for having me on SGT Report. It's one of my favorite sites.
Oh, you're too kind. We sure do appreciate all the work you do. We post everything that you post. And today, Dave, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about Obamacare. And I want to talk with you about the cover-up of the murder of SEAL Team 6. I think it speaks directly to the tyranny and the totalitarian nature of the Obama administration and all of the ills that plague us. And it needs to be talked about. We cannot let that one go down the memory hole. So first, on Obamacare, you just posted something the other day from CNBC, which was a piece in which an experienced hacker named David Kennedy said no security was ever built into the Obamacare website. And he says, quote, "It's hard to go back and fix the security issues because security was never built into it." It's really stunning. Obamacare is really the Titanic at this point, isn't it, Dave?
Oh, absolutely, Sean. You know, it shouldn't be surprising based on the track record of Obamacare. You know, I'm a practicing orthopedic surgeon. I have been for the past 25 years. In addition to my work in the front line of healthcare delivery of patients on a daily basis, I run a research institute that focuses on healthcare cost containment, and I've been involved in healthcare policy since 1988. So I have a track record with healthcare policy, track record at taking care of folks. I think that's important for your listeners to know, and because, you know, I think a lot of folks that we see in the media talking about the good or the bad of Obamacare, they really don't have any functional medical knowledge. And unfortunately, those of us on the front line of healthcare delivery are against Obamacare. And the critics of us, the supporters, if you will, of Obamacare, say the reason why we're against Obamacare is because we are racist, right? It's the first thing out of their mouths. You know, Sean, I'm not a racist. I don't know of anyone that's opposed to Obamacare that's a racist. We're realists. And the reality of the situation is the Obamacare will not create more affordable, more available, or more quality-oriented health care. In fact, it'll do the opposite. It's going to make healthcare less available, more expensive, and less quality oriented. Those are the facts. And the reason why I can say that is because I've read Obamacare several times, as opposed to, and I'm not even sure that Barack Obama has read Obamacare based on the stuff that comes out of his mouth, because he is so factually incorrect about the things he says, whether it's you're not going to lose your insurance when you sign up for Obamacare, which there are 29 episodes, and at least I played on my show, of video episodes of him saying you're not going to lose your doctor, you're not going to lose your health insurance, when in fact, if you read Obamacare, it becomes very obvious that anyone and everyone who signs up for Obamacare will in fact lose their health care coverage in some manner. So it becomes very frustrating because the heart, the soul, and the core of Obamacare is based on something I fought against my entire career, against insurance companies and HMOs. And that's the most unethical and inhumane means of cutting healthcare costs, and that's the rationing and denying of care. That's the most unethical means, Sean, of cutting healthcare costs. And that's what Obamacare is all about. Now, many people say, well, why do you believe that? Because I've read Obamacare, both parts, Sean. And when folks say both parts, what are you talking about? The healthcare bill was passed in March of 2010. Right, that was the second part of Obamacare. But the first part of Obamacare was hidden, operative word, hidden in the stimulus bill in February of 2009. Buried deep within the stimulus bill. And I was one of the first folks that figured this out because I read it and started talking about it, which got me in trouble with the administration and many folks that are Obama supporters saying, oh, you're making this stuff up. Wasn't making it up, is in black and white in the Obamacare, about 500 pages into the stimulus bill. And in the stimulus bill, it created Many people, Sarah Palin says, well, there are death panels in Obamacare, and many people got downer on that. Well, and she talked about it being in the healthcare bill. Well, you know what? It is in Obamacare, but the main death panels, the rationing boards, that's the other word for death panels, the rationing boards were actually hidden in the stimulus bill. About 500 pages deep in the stimulus bill, Sean, there was a portion where it talked about healthcare, and it talked about the creation of an organization called the Federal Coordinating Council for Comparative Effectiveness Research. That's a rationing board. That's a death panel. And so folks say, well, how do you know that? Because of the words in the title. Comparative effectiveness, Sean. This is something that I fought against in the mid-90s in Hillary Care, because Hillary Care, just as Obamacare, was based on the British medical system model of rationing care. And in the British system, they created something called comparative effectiveness. Comparative effectiveness, Sean, the definition of it is the approval or rejection of a treatment or test based on two things: the cost of that treatment or test divided by the number of years the patient will benefit. That is a rationing formula. That is directly out of the British healthcare model. That was in Hillary Care. That's why I fought against Hillary Care, and we were able to defeat it. But this rationing board was also created in Obamacare. Not in the healthcare bill, Sean, but in the stimulus bill. And it went further in the stimulus bill. They created a second office called the National Coordinator's Office for Health Information Technology. Well, when you go further in the stimulus bill, it says that this National Coordinator's Office, direct quote, Sean, from the stimulus bill, will, quote, guide medical decisions at the time and place of care, end quote. It went on to say that this coordinator will be responsible for monitoring treatments to ensure providers, doctors, nurses, therapists, and hospitals are following government protocols. It went on to say hospitals and providers that are not, quote, meaningful users of the new system will face penalties, end quote, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services can impose, quote, more stringent measures of meaningful use over time, end quote. So what does all this mean, Sean? In July of 2009, 5 months after the stimulus bill was passed, I was contacted by members of Congress who asked me to come and speak and be the keynote speaker at a congressional dinner in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And I did that. And I presented this information about Obamacare that was hidden in the stimulus bill. Now, this might not be surprising to you or your listeners, but in the room were dozens and dozens of congressmen and dozens of their staff members. When I presented this information that this stuff was hidden in the stimulus bill, Sean, I would say all but two of these congressmen started looking around the room, looking at each other like, we passed this? This was in the stimulus bill? There were only two that I could see that were like, yeah, nodding their head like, yeah, we know it was in there. So when I asked these congressmen, I said, look, Obamacare is already halfway implemented. Now remember, this is in July of 2009. The stimulus bill passed in February 2009, and the healthcare bill didn't pass till March of 2010. I said, listen, tell me what this means. What this national coordinator, this guide medical decisions, the time and place and care, and the fact that you're going to face penalties. And I go, what does this mean? Well, when you go through it and you look through the stimulus bill, and it was supposed to be implemented in January 1st, initially of 2013. Then it was moved back to January 1st, 2014. Now it looks like it's going to be moved back to January 1st, 2015 as far as the penalty phase and the like. Here's what's going to happen. When a doc walks into a room with their nurse, they'll examine the patient. They'll come up with a diagnosis. They'll have a code associated with that diagnosis. You'll type that code in a little iPad or handheld device, and it's going to go to the National Coordinator's Office. The National Coordinator's Office is going to take the protocol that was developed through this Federal Coordinating Council for Comparative Effectiveness Research, this rationing board. And by the way, how many folks on that board actually take care of patients? There are a couple MDs, but there are very few. And the MDs that are on that board that Obama appointed 1 week after the stimulus bill was passed into law, I'm not sure they've ever taken care of a patient. So these essentially bureaucrats that have no functional medical knowledge are going to create these boards. They're going to be based on these protocols. They're going to be based on rationing. And what they're going to do is they're going to hand this over to the coordinator. So we send the electronic message to and code to the coordinator's office come January 1st, 2015. And what's going to come back, Sean, is a protocol of how to take care of that patient, A, B, and C. A protocol that's been devised by people that have no functional medical knowledge, that are thousands of miles away from and have no knowledge about that patient other than a code. This is cookbook medicine. And I'm telling you, after being involved in medicine for 30 years, when you start practicing medicine from a cookbook, people get hurt and people die. Yeah, it's a violation of the Hippocratic oath that we all take of doing no harm. It is the absolute harm, Sean.
Yeah. Well.
So what's going to happen, Sean, is we're going to get this code, right? And let's say I look at the code and I go, well, I've been doing this 30 years. I disagree with this protocol. I'm going to do what's right for the patient, and I'm not going to follow the protocol. I'm now violating the protocol. And according to the stimulus bill, if I violate that protocol, I'm going to face penalties. And if I continue to do it, the more, quote, stringent measures are going to be applied to me. So I said to these congressmen in the room, I said, okay, January 1st, 2013, 2014, 2015, whenever this kicks in with the penalty phase, I go against the protocol because I'm going to do what's right for my patient. I'm not going to do what some bureaucrat who's no medical knowledge is telling me to do. I'm going to violate the protocol and do what's right for that patient. What's the penalty I'm going to face? Are you telling me I'm going to be fined $100 when I get paid $20 to see that patient? Congressman stands up and goes, no, Dr. Janda, your first offense, you could be fined up to $100,000. Sean, I started laughing. Nobody else in the room was laughing. And I said, okay, well, let's say I win the lottery, and I say, fine, I'm going to give you that $100,000. I go, the next patient that comes in and I violate the protocol a second time, it says more stringent measures are going to be utilized. What does that mean? Another congressman stands up and he looks at me and goes, Dr. Janda, on a second offense, and it's going to be an arbitrary nature based on the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And if you don't donate to the right organization or the right political party, second offense, you could well go to jail. I started laughing, Sean. Nobody else in the room was laughing.
Well, let me get a word in
Sean,
here.
My mom was a history teacher, right? And she taught me a lot of different systems that were occurring in the world. You know, capitalism, free market capitalism, crony capitalism, socialism, communism. A congressman stands up at the end when we're in the question and answer session. He goes, Dr. Janda, I'm going to be doing some Sunday morning TV shows, some of the big ones. And if they ask me what's the one word to describe Obamacare, what do I say? And I'm thinking malignant, cancerous, devastating, and then it comes to me, what would my mom say? And my mom, when she educated me, she taught me about something when you have authoritarian nationalism that penalizes and punishes anyone and everyone who opposes the state. That type of system is defined as being fascism.
Right.
And when I looked at this congressman, I said, I hate to say this. Here we are in the Capitol building, supposedly the mecca of freedom. The rotunda's, 200 feet away. I go, if somebody asks me what's the one word, I go, after you have told me that I could be fined $100,000 after doing what's right for my patient, or go to jail on a second offense if we're taking care of my patient the right way, the one word to describe Obamacare is fascist.
Well, Dave, let me ask you this. When you say that they snuck this in a stimulus bill, it reminds me of the two sections that were snuck into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which allow for indefinite detention of American citizens. They love to sneak this stuff in. It's like it's backdoor totalitarianism, because by the time the citizens realize what's going on, it's too late. It's already law. And, what's the definition of tyranny? Really, at the end of the day, it's when the government can enforce laws on the citizenry that the government itself, the government officials and politicians themselves don't obey. And we see that with Obamacare. Harry Reid just exempted his staff last week from having to sign up for Obamacare. And, it gets me back to this idea of no security ever being built into this Obamacare site. Let me play this clip for you and listen to this exchange with David Kennedy and the folks there at CNBC. Listen to this.
But what would you tell people in the meantime? Don't even go to the website, don't access it, because you're putting yourself at risk by doing that?
Yeah, putting your information on there is definitely a risk. And since it's on the federal level, they don't have to disclose that there's any type of breach. So if your information gets compromised...
What do you mean?
You don't have to get notified that if your information is actually compromised. So if healthcare.gov gets hacked and all of the information is taken out of it, you're not, the government's not liable to actually disclose that that information's been taken or compromised. So you basically have to monitor your own credit.
Did you hear that, David?
I did.
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, the only thing that can save us from Obamacare is if it collapses under its own weight. But people have already been hurt. People on the 31st are going to start losing their health insurance officially, and there is no other alternative. People with cancer, people with existing conditions and existing relationships with doctors and hospitals are going to lose their coverage. They've already been cut from their coverage. They've already been notified that they're going to lose it. And what are those people to do?
Well, I can tell you, starting 3 weeks ago, it reached panic phase in my patients. Starting 3 weeks ago, people started getting those cancellation notices. And people have been coming in the office absolutely panicked, saying, look, I've had health insurance my entire life. I can afford it, but now I'm just getting notices that I'm canceled, and I go to the website and I can't get on. Let me tell you something, Sean. I've been criticized for making this statement, but I'm going to say it again because it's a God's honest truth and it's accurate. I believe Obamacare is like a bomb. You see, I believe Obamacare was developed. It was constructed by the New World Order Group, the Tides Foundation, the Apollo Alliance, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the AMA. These are all entities that are bought and paid for by the New World Order global elite crowd. Obamacare was created to be a bomb that destroys the healthcare delivery system. The plan was for the bomb to go off at a point in time, later than right now actually, but later down the line, it implodes, and as it implodes and explodes, people throw their hands up and go, oh my gosh, this is horrible, the healthcare delivery system's in trouble, I can't get care. And the plan was for people to run to the government and say, government, save me. And the government will have flipped a switch to jump into a single-player plan. Now, here's the problem. The plan was for the Obamacare to explode, to implode like a bomb, but not yet. Here's where they blew it. They ended up, and this, I grew up in Chicago, and I'm used to Chicago politics. I lived my whole life there. What happened was Valerie Jarrett, who's the handler for the New World Order crowd of Barack Obama, right. Her daughter's father-in-law is a big player in the company CGI that was given the not $600 million contract, but $1.4 billion contract, as I understand it from my contacts in Canada, to develop the website. In addition, Michelle Obama's buddy from Princeton was given it. So it's pure patronage. So they said, hey, you know what? What we're going to do is we're going to do a little Chicago politics stuff here. The easy part of the whole thing of Obamacare is the website. So we're going to give that to our friends, and we're going to give them a huge amount of money, and that money will come flowing back to us somehow. I'm sure there's some kickback scheme involved, whether it's through Valerie Jarrett's daughter's father-in-law as well as Michelle Obama's Princeton buddy, but there's going to be some blowback coming back in donations or God knows what. And meanwhile, we're going to set up the system to implode later on. Once we get people involved through the website and signed up, then we're going to blow it up. They never counted on these people being incompetent where they couldn't even set up a website. So what happened is they were focusing all their efforts, the Obama administration, of blowing up healthcare delivery once people got in the system. What happened is people haven't been able to get into the system because of their own greed and because of the old incompetence of folks they gave to set up the website. It blew up in their hands. It blew up in the bomb maker's hands. And that's what we're looking at right now. Let me tell you, Sean, I think there's one solution to Obamacare. And here it is. It has to be immediately repealed. This stuff where the president comes out by decree and goes, this law exists and this one doesn't, and this part of the law is going to be implemented and this isn't. No, as you mentioned, that's the definition of totalitarianism, of a tyranny, of fascism. That has nothing to do with a democratic republic. So what has to happen for anybody to make any determination of insurance companies can still have people involved in the current plans they currently have, that can't come from a decree from the president or the dictator at large. It has to come from a repeal of the law itself. And here's where the Republicans are negligent. And I've been just as hard, on Republicans as I have Democrats because I believe they're all owned and operated by the same criminal banking syndicate. I call them Republicrats.
Yeah,
whether it's
most of them.
John Boehner or Harry Reid or Mitch McConnell or Cantor or Ryan or all these guys, Pelosi, they're all owned by the same syndicate. If the Republicans had any core of free market principles, what they would be doing right now, what they would have been doing months ago, is repealing Obamacare. And as of today, I see a little talk at the edges about it, but I don't see any action. And the reason there isn't any action is because the owners of the Republican Party are the same as the owners of the Democrat Party. They're the same as the owners of Barack Obama and the Bushes and the Clintons and you name it. And they're saying, you can talk about it, but you're not going to take action to repeal this because, let's face it, if the power elite, they've always had a goal of getting control of people. Obamacare is about the ultimate control of people. If you can control people's health care or lack thereof, you can control every aspect of their life. And that's what this is about.
You know, what alarms me beyond belief is the fact that we still see in the mainstream mockingbird media, even on Fox News, I can be at the club, on the treadmill, running, and I'm tuning in, listening to these mockingbirds, bring guests on to debate whether or not the Obamacare website, healthcare.gov, can be fixed. They will not focus on these issues that we've been discussing. They will only focus on the puffery and the issues on the edge of, can the website be fixed in time? Even Fox News, which pretends to be an outlet for, the right, for conservatism, for something other than MSNBC and CNN liberalism. And it's not. It's just a smokescreen. The only place you can find real information is on the internet, from websites like yours, from websites like mine, from all of the others in the alternative media, Breitbart, right on down the list. Now, what in the hell are we going to do here for these people who have already lost their insurance? Because according to David Kennedy, they would be absolutely insane to go to healthcare.gov and enter all their personal information. You'd have to be insane to do that. But all these people are going to be desperate, and that's what they're going to do.
I completely agree with you. Here's what every one of your listeners, of everyone who goes to your site, of everyone who goes to my site, anyone who goes to zero, you name it, what they have to do. I've dealt with a lot of politicians throughout the past 30 years. And I could probably count on one hand the number of my trust. And I've met hundreds, if not thousands. There's two things they understand, Sean. One, how much money they have to run for re-election. And two, if they're on the wrong side of the issue and the people are getting it, and if they're seen to be on the wrong side of the issue, they'll never be able to get back and sit in their big leather comfy chairs. Okay? The only way we can beat these totalitarian, and let's call them what they are, scum, is by every one of your listeners to get on the phone and call the representatives in the House and in the Senate in Washington and in the House and the Senate of each and every one of their states. Because let me tell you something, the states have control over how Obamacare or if it's implemented. And they need to say the following. You need to stop and repeal Obamacare immediately. And if you do not, I will not only not vote for you the next time, I am going to actively pursue you being removed in a recall movement immediately. Let me tell you, Sean, it scares the living heck out of them. And every one of your listeners needs to let their family members know. They need to let their neighbors know. And when you generate enough support like that, and they're hearing this from all sides, all of a sudden, the money they have in their coffers, they realize isn't enough to get them reelected. And reluctantly, they will be forced to do the right thing. I believe there's some huge pressure currently being applied by folks like you and me and our listeners already. But if we can up the ante just a little bit more, up that thermostat, that heat a little bit more, these folks will melt like the Wicked Witch.
Yeah, because they're on thin ice. I mean, to push that metaphor through, they are literally on thin ice. Anybody at this point who's supporting Obamacare, who's not actively fighting to have this thing dismantled, they're not only on thin ice, they're impeachable themselves, to your point. And
remember, Sean, just this past week, there was a fella on Capitol Hill, and he said, look, the people are getting fed up. And they're seeing you guys not obeying the law and them and the people having to obey the laws that you create. And when you create that scenario, you create a situation where you can have his words, an overthrow of the government.
Yeah, Dave, you're right. That was Michael Cannon, the Cato Institute's director of health policy, and he reminded people there that it's our right to alter our government or our revolutionary right to overthrow it. And we reported that at SGT Report. And I have to tell you, David, I don't think that I've seen anybody in his position of power coming out to speak truth publicly like that. It's one of the first times I've seen that, and it's very, very powerful. It really, to me, is an absolute litmus test to how fed up people are getting.
And Sean, I believe nothing happens by accident in Washington or at a congressional hearing. I don't know if you've ever testified at a congressional hearing. I have. They try to vet everything that you're going to say before you say it. I believe he said it, they knew he was going to say it, and they let it be recorded on the record. Yeah. Okay? And I believe that there are powers and forces that are now fed up with what's happening in Washington. I believe the criminal international banking syndicate is losing their control. You've also seen people like retired General Vallely, who occasionally is on Fox News. And I agree with you, by the way, what you said earlier on Fox News. I think they're part of the problem, not part of the solution, right? They're part of the syndicate. Vallely has come forward with a number of other generals saying, look, Obama, Biden, Boehner, Pelosi, Reid, and McConnell need to resign from office immediately. He's been very straightforward about that. So now we have a portion of our military that's saying, look, enough. We've had it, and it's going to end. And when they start coming forward like that, again, that's no mistake either. I truly believe, Sean, that if, American Revolution, what was there, 20% of the population was involved in that revolution, while the rest, 84% just sat around and eating their bonbons and saying, whoa, so much, the king's okay. I think we're at that tipping point. Because when you see guys like this fellow from the Cato Institute at a congressional hearing saying things like this, when you see former generals stepping forward and saying enough, I think we're at a point in time that all we have to do is mobilize our listeners and start making those calls, start sending the emails, just saying repeal Obamacare. And then the second part of that is, just like General Valley said, Obama and the leadership of Congress need to resign now. I truly believe that's the way we get out of this.
Just powerful. What a great call to action. I had no idea when we got on the line today that this would be a call to action discussion, but that's absolutely what it is. Obamacare is a New World Order bomb. It was designed to go off and detonate and destroy what was left of our republic, and we have a chance to repeal this thing. It's our duty to make sure it happens. Dave, let me ask you this before we let you go. I live in an area with orthopedic surgeons as buddies. Literally, I'm looking out my bedroom back window here, and I can see two of their homes. There's 4 orthopedic surgeons. I play poker with these guys. They're all very good men, but they're very left brain. One of them actually repaired my son's arm when he had a compound fracture from a skateboarding accident a couple years ago. Great, great guys, family men. All of them very left-brained, though. And when we get together to play poker, sports and things of that nature are usually the topics they're comfortable talking about. Where in the world did you get your truth-telling DNA? Because most of the guys that I know in your position aren't there with us.
Well, I think that comes from my parents and my family. My mom was a history teacher. My dad was a civil engineer who had built a lot of large buildings in Chicago and had a lot of contact with a lot of folks in politics. My mom, being a history teacher, also had a lot of contact with folks in the political world and in the economic world. She always used to say about history, dig deep. Don't accept the superficial storytelling that's given to you. Dig deep. I also come from a long line of activists, if you will. My great-grandfather and that whole side of the family came from Czechoslovakia. They came because they were run out of Czechoslovakia because they tried to institute a revolution against the Habsburg family that was oppressive in nature. A large number of my family was killed in that revolution. They lost that, and some members of my family were able to escape. When they escaped, my great grandfather actually was very young. He was actually became the youngest brewmaster of the Pilsner Brewery in Prague, and he was very well known within the country, which is why he got involved in the revolution as kind of a leader within it, as someone who was known around the country. He escaped with his life, as did other members of my family. They came to the United States, and they actually immigrated to Chicago. When they immigrated in Chicago, he went around to a number of different breweries, and he said, "Listen, I can make your beer better. I can make it the best beer in the country." Finally, a guy took him up on it, a guy by the name of a guy at Garden City Brewery in Chicago. The guy didn't have any kids, and when years passed, he gave the brewery at a very cheap price to my great grandfather, and he built that brewery into actually the largest brewery in Chicago, and actually one of the largest breweries in the United States. The reason why I bring that up is that he ended up losing that brewery in Prohibition. He came to work one day, and the feds were there when Prohibition was instituted. They had locked all the doors, and all his employees were on the sidewalk. And he had a wife and 4 kids. They had a restaurant and a bar across the street where they would bring the beer initially, but he had the beer all over the city and all over the state, and was starting to distribute it around the country. And he looked at these federal agents and he said, I left Czechoslovakia because of oppression. And I never thought I would be facing that here in the United States. He goes, "You're taking my business from me. You're taking my livelihood from me, and you're taking my product away from me." And they said, "Well, it's a law that was passed." And he said, "Unlock the door. I want to go get my nameplate." And he got his copper nameplate from his door. He brought it back. I have that nameplate sitting in front of me now. It's something I look at every day when I wake up. When he was so devastated over what happened, within a couple of days of this prohibition being instituted, he was so disillusioned, so upset, he had a stroke and ended up dying. And on his deathbed, he told my grandfather, he said, "I should be fighting them, and instead I let them beat me. And in beating me, they've made me ill where I'm going to die." He gave my grandfather 30 gold coins. He said, "The same government that destroyed my business and has destroyed my life is going to come for these same gold coins, and they're also going to destroy the economy." He goes, "Use these gold coins, never turn them into the government. Use them to preserve our family, what's left of it." My grandfather died, my great-grandfather died the next day, and my grandfather used those gold coins to get our family through the Depression.
Wow.
In 1933, the great freedom fighter himself, FDR, and I use that term loosely, as you know, made it illegal to own gold. They came for those gold coins in 1933.
Yes, they did.
And my grandfather remembered his father's words, and he never turned them in and fought the government on the gold issue.
So you come from a long line of rebels. And
the point is, Sean, is that same government that came for my great-grandfather's business and livelihood with the institution of prohibition, which was really a fascist piece of legislation, in 2012 and 2013 came for my business, healthcare, through a fascist piece of legislation, that being Obamacare.
That's right.
I'm not about to have a stroke. I'm not about to die. What I am going to do is what my great-grandfather didn't do, and that's fight these scum every day to preserve the freedom and liberty of not only my family, but every family in this country. So when you say, where do you get it from? It's from the inspiration, because I have his nameplate I see every morning. But the other thing I have, Sean, is I have a picture my dad gave me of my great-grandfather standing in front of his brewery before the feds took it over. And my dad used to have that on his dresser. And it's now on my dresser because my dad has died. And every morning when I wake up, the first thing I see is that picture to remind me of what this government is capable of. Let's face it, Barack Obama is a puppet of the New World Order criminal international banking syndicate. Just as Woodrow Wilson, just as FDR were puppets of the same organization that took my great-grandfather's brewery, the same organization that tried to take my grandfather's gold is the same organization that's behind Obamacare. They're all the same.
That's right.
And George Washington used to say, I will die on my feet before I will live on my knees. These fascists are absolutely convinced people will live on their knees. Every one of our listeners needs to get up off their knees and stand on their feet and take these people on, because if they don't, there will be nothing left of our country or the future for our children and grandchildren.
Dave, your passion cuts through. It's truly amazing. It's inspiring. It's in the spirit of the founding fathers. And you guys, if you love his passion as much as I do, if you recognize him as a freedom fighter, which is what he is, you got to check out Operation Freedom. Dave, where do they find your show?
Actually, we do it live every Sunday from 3 to 5 Eastern. And if folks go to davejanda.com, we have a live stream going every Sunday from 3 to 5. And then we upload the show in podcast form, usually by the morning after the show, by every Monday morning.
Dave, thanks so much. It truly is inspiring. I know that we were going to talk about the cover-up of the murder of SEAL Team 6. Let's shelve that for another time because we're out of time today. Let's get together here in the very near future so that we can talk about the cover-up of the murder of SEAL Team 6.
No, I think that's great, Sean. I think I think that's a really, really important story. Charles Strange has been out there in front on this. They're gaining a lot of momentum, and I think it's going to really come back and bite these guys in the White House.
Yeah, it ought to, because you're right. Michael Strange was killed in that Chinook helicopter that went down in Afghanistan, and Charlie Strange has been very vocal about the inconsistencies and outright lies from both the Pentagon and the White House regarding the death of his son. And he, like you, is a freedom fighter and a truth teller, and it's men like you guys that really inspire. So we'll get you back on to talk about that in the very near future. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Sean, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to reach and touch your listeners, and I'd like to thank you for everything you do at SGT Report. It is truly a remarkable site that provides unbelievably great and important information to folks that they'll never see in the mainstream media.
Wow, I can't tell you how much that means to me. It really means the world to me. Rory and Peter are there on a daily basis helping me keep it going, and it's compliments like that that really help grease the wheel. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Sean.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks, Sean. I appreciate all you do, and thanks for your time. Be
Bye-bye.
safe.